Hello, Facebook. We should now be live in the group. So as scheduled, and I'm so excited for this. I'm joined by Sundance Robson. Hi, Sundance.
Hello, Ankush.
So we'll give
and everybody watching.
Yeah, we'll give everyone just like a minute or two to join us and to check us out. I know. Sometimes it takes a minute or two for people to log in, and if you're logged in, please do use the comment box to say hello. Sundance won't be able to see you, but I will relay the messages back to him. And if we don't mention every single comment, it's not because we don't love you. We do. We care deeply about you, but we might not have time. So I want to make sure we keep it flowing. And I will try, and if I don't get to a comment or Sundance doesn't get to a comment, then I will try and do that after the Facebook Live. But I'm very excited. And as usual, as I've done these before, we'll spend some time with the interviewee, in this case with Sundance, and talk a little bit about what we've got to talk about. But then we'll certainly leave space for questions from anyone in the group. And we might have some questions from people who are interested in doing some of the work that you've started already and are doing at the moment. So very, very exciting. I know we had a bunch of people who said they were looking forward to this, and I know we've had a bunch of people who can't make it but are very interested in watching the recording. So looking forward to seeing all the comments and everything with that. So maybe let's just start a little bit about, kind of who are you? You're not maybe well known to most people in the group. So for people who don't know you, who is Sundance Robson?
Sundance Robson was a person that never had planned on being a coach. And I had always been a musician most of my life. And I ended up finding my way into sound therapy and sound healing. And as a result of doing that, I found an interactive quality within that. And I always wanted to get deeper with people because getting deeper in myself led to me sort of becoming freer in myself. And when I met you, just over a year ago, I didn't know anything about 3P at all. I didn't know, I didn't understand the world of coaching. I was very much blind to it. All I knew about coaching was Tony Robbins. That's what I knew about coaching. And after sort of getting into that and spending about like 2 months in it, I thought, I don't know if this is really something that I want to do. But I still saw that there was an element to setting sort of people on fire and stuff like that I wanted to take part in. Because there was so much a piece of me that was suppressed in life that, through just what life brings, I had found myself sort of silencing myself. And I saw that coaches were able to sort of erupt people in a certain way. And I thought that by really motivating people, people would really start to erupt. Well, I found that through 3P, that being able to drop into this space, being able to get into that centerpiece of you, that being able to experience the stillness, being able to experience the silence, being able to experience this right now, what's happening between us, just that slowing down, that this was what that eruption was. This is what made me more productive in real time, in real life. Is that I could sit down with you, you could really slow me down, you could get me past my head game so that when I reemerged back into life as fast as it was, that there was still a piece of me that was slowed down, that could think, and that could be very acute and very aware of the things that were going on around me, even though the things that were going on around me were fast. That just because somebody else's hyperactivity is increasing doesn't mean that mine has to. One of the very first conversations that we had was, you asked me why I wanted to be a coach. And I couldn't answer that question. And I actually thought about that question yesterday. Why do you want to be a coach, Sundance? I actually don't know if I can still even answer that question. But there was one thing in that conversation as to something you mentioned, and it was grounding. You talked about how important grounding was. That it was like, it was just, it comprised the body of everything, was this grounding. And I needed to understand the grounding of the principles. And being able to stay in that grounding, even though I don't necessarily know where the conversation's going, even though I don't necessarily know what that person's going through, I'm still grounded into myself, and they're going through whatever it is that they're going through. There's probably a part of them that's in a misunderstanding. So that's sort of what it is that I am. Who Sundance is, I'm just me.
So let's just kind of backtrack a little tiny bit, and so you mentioned you and I met just over a year ago, and you talked about coaching. So were you, just for everyone listening, were you a coach back then? Like, did you have clients?
I was the person. No, I never had clients. I was a person that said I was a coach. You know, it was something that I was just trying to be. You know, I was I was this person that wanted to have conversations with people and to see what happened. You know, but I had no direction. I had zero direction. I had nothing. I didn't even know where to start.
And what's your if you don't mind me asking, what's kind of your background in education kind of before that? Are you a highly educated guy? Have you got degrees? Have you got to?
I dropped out of. I went to school in high school. I went to high school in grade 9, and I left in grade 9, and I was there for 6 years, and then I returned to just complete it a couple of years later, right? So I went back and got my general education, my GED.
So that's up to about what age 16 equivalent?
Well, yeah. Well, in grade 12, it's a generality of the comprised stuff that they take in high school, right? So we're not talking about anything superior here.
Okay. So your background is, you've had a very general education. We met a year ago at a kind of a personal development conference, success conference. You said you were a coach, but it was kind of more aspirational. You didn't have clients, and at that stage, you knew nothing about the principles. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, and so right now, again, I guess part of what we're talking about today is you've recently got a contract with the local government. What is that contract to do?
So this is really interesting. For me, it's really interesting. I never expected this to happen. Shooting for the government wasn't something that I thought, well, I'm going to go out and I'm going to try to secure a government contract. Part of my issue with schooling was that I wasn't ever able to learn with an integrated high school. So I was always in tutorial programs or special education programs. Well, lo and behold, just from me doing my public offerings, from me going out doing low cost, low price offerings with the sound healing that I do and offering an interactive satsang or coaching conversation just like this, people started to have conversations outside of those gatherings. And that conversation made it to somebody in the school board. And then that person just looked me up and searched me on Facebook. Then they weren't even my friend. They just sent me a message via Facebook that I had to accept. And it said that they had heard I do performances. And I was sort of like, well, that's already a misunderstanding. You know, I'm sort of more of a meditative practitioner and a coach. And we just basically exchanged a text conversation that led to a phone call, that led to me having a meeting with them, that led to this contract becoming secure to work with kids in the high school that were exactly like I was, that they're kids that don't integrate well into the regular high school setup. And so they're set aside and they're grouped off into this other room where they go and they take their classes sort of correspondently with these teachers one-on-one to help them with their learning. So the funny joke of it all is that I've actually never left that classroom. I've just returned back to it again. And now I'm sitting with these kids that are essentially in the same position that I was. But I never actually ever had to do anything or set out a map to get back there. I just did. And some of the things in the 3P that are so simple is it always talks about this returning home, you know, and that's essentially sort of what this has been like, you know, it's a returning home in some ways, you know, there's a piece of me that has returned home and there's also a part of my mind that is going into the school and working with these kids that don't integrate well.
So okay, so this is fantastic. So here you are a year ago as a guy who, says you're a coach, but no clients. You've never done anything like this before. You've done some other therapy work. You've done sound healing and gong baths and other stuff. And a year later, you've got a contract with the local government, which sound like, is a little bit of fate, a little bit of, it's not something you planned, but to go and help children that are in the same position that you were many years ago by pointing them to, and would you say a lot of your work with them is grounded in the principles?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
I wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't 3 principles, right?
Okay. So what's happened in between? What happened in that year where, the first inkling you had of something called the 3 principles was a year ago? How on earth have you gone from knowing there's some words that are the 3 principles to a year later, some people might say being confident enough, being were you always this confident, self-assured person that you could just go and do it? Like what on earth happened in that time?
I made a lot of mistakes taking action. And working backwards, I went to the Powerful Men's group, the men's immersion. Prior to that, I took in pretty much every single 3 principles video that I had available to me online. I watched videos that Michael Neal had with some webinars, and I understood sort of the grounding in a lot of these people, and the mind consciousness thought aspect of it was that Sydney Banks had this enlightenment experience. And I never actually even knew what enlightenment was a year ago either. I never knew what enlightenment was even going to the men's immersion. I never found that out until I came out of that. And I stalled even when I went into the Powerful Men's group. So that whole year, looking back, was that I stalled even to interact with the Powerful Men's group. Then I was sort of like, let's see what this is about. Then it was sort of like, wow, I can do this if I understand that there's that divinity inside of me, that there is that place of stillness inside of me. I actually have a shot at this. And then I realized that it was there. And so then I sort of was like, if I can just be that, and I have a conversation with somebody, well, perhaps they'll take that on themselves. They'll be still. And then I was like, oh, all the stuff that Ankush was saying about grounding is right. I don't have to be this head game guy. I can just be grounded in this matter, all of this content, if I really understand this, I'll be grounded in that. And then the people become grounded in front of me. This is amazing. So I just continued to show up to people that were having public offerings. So I made myself of service to people and had conversations with people while I was in service for people. And those conversations, I saw that people were experiencing a sense of grounding in those conversations. And that led me to a place of where I was confident enough to maybe attempt having a group gathering or a group offering. And as I did that, everything it was just trial and error, it was taking action. I had to take action. If I wasn't going to take action, I wasn't going to do it. I had to just get over myself and get out there and do it.
And did you have any insecurities and fears along the way, or were you, are you just one of those guys that because some people might be watching this and going, oh, he just sounds like a confident guy. He just went and, took this out there, whatever. But I feel afraid, I'm not sure if I know enough to really do this work. Did you have some of those same fears and doubts?
I was a traumatized little child that didn't grow up with a father, that had this story, and I had no sense of masculinity. I was completely needy. I was so afraid of how the public would receive me on every single end. And then I thought about my social media and all of the friends that I had growing up that would never take me seriously anyways. And I thought, well, I'm going to post this stuff and then people are just going to make fun of me on my comment thread. And then my social identity or my public proof of who I am will go down the tube, and the people that are interested in me won't be interested in me because I've got these guys that are making asinine comments on my comment thread. So that was all my head game, right? And then I posted an event and none of it happened because the comments and the positive reaction that people had for me, those came first. It wasn't the insults. And because all of those positive reactions came first, it didn't make room for insult. And if someone ever had something remotely close as an insult for me, it just came as feedback. And it came back as like an email. It came back as a message. It came back as a one-to-one conversation. It came back as hey, maybe you should try this. I don't know, man. I look back at the last year. I don't know how I went through life. I can't even remember. It's like amnesia in some way. I look back at my life and it's like all this data. I'm not tied to this emotional baggage anymore, and that was 3P. I spent so much time trying to look at everything from the outside, right? I tried looking at it from the fog, and I tried to see what that space inside of me was. I tried to see what the divinity was standing on the outside, looking in from the fog. But then when I turned around and I stood on the inside and I looked back out, everything was clear. I lost sound.
Sorry, I was muted. This is being broadcast to a bunch of coaches or a group of people who are coaches or wannabe coaches. And, it's great to interview you because you're not someone who's been doing this for 20 years and, you're someone who's really at the start of your career, really at the start of taking the principles out. And what I love about you is that, you almost didn't come to the immersion, right? Like, that was in September, and it was, I think, only a few days before you finally booked your flight to come along. I remember that. And so really from September was really your first in-depth experience of the principles. And within kind of 3 or 4 months, you're now taking this to school children. I mean, that's really, really quite fast. And so I'm so pleased to be interviewing you because I think, and I genuinely mean this, it's really inspirational to the rest of us, because I remember having coaching conversations with you, where you were like, I don't know if I can do this, what will people think about me? having the same fears and doubts that we all have, and yet you carried on going anyway. And now these kids are really getting some beautiful conversations and an experience of you, an experience of what you're pointing to that they would never have had if it wasn't for you taking that action.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sorry, go ahead, Ankush.
No, go on. What were you going to say?
The men's immersion was very, very key for me. That as much as that I'm serving in public, that I'm actually going and seeking out something like the men's immersion to get fed, to have someone offer into my life the way that you offered into my life. I slept in that one day, that one morning, and I woke up, to, someone picking me up in the cab. My roommate's picking me up in the cab, and everyone's already down at the channel or this lake that you guys have in this park, and they're already walking around. And I was thinking, like, I could have just taken some time. We were challenged to just take some time for ourselves that evening. And we're 6 hours back here in Saskatchewan. And so everybody in the UK is 6 hours ahead. You're 6 hours ahead. So I'm talking to people, it's midnight, and I'm talking back to people here at home, and it's 6 p.m., right? So I talked to people all through the night till midnight, and it was all my mind. I couldn't sit with myself. And I realized I had that was like one of the most defining moments leading up to my life. It was a blunder. It was an embarrassment. And I saw the mind. That was when I saw the mind. I was like, holy, this is really, like, this is an issue. I've flown all the way to the UK from central Canada. I've flown all the way to the UK to sit at the UK and still be in central Canada. My head is in Canada still, and my body's here in England, and it didn't make any sense that my mind had that much control over me. And then when I came back home, I woke up the one morning and I looked outside and I saw everything alive. I saw how the trees were coming up from the ground. I saw the birds flying around. And that was when I was able to connect the dots and see that this nature that is outside, and just as active as the nature is around us, so is the mind inside of me. And when I made that connection between nature and the mind, and that the mind just operates outside, you don't have to tell it what to do. It just does it. It started to make sense to me. And that was when I started to really open up and say, okay, I understand it. I get it. I understand what this enlightenment stuff is now. So part of me had this, it just really popped, but it happened as the result of a blunder, and that's what the grace of the 3 Ps are. That's the grace in it.
So, I want to open this up to questions. So if anyone's listening to this, and I know we've got a bunch of people watching, Hazel says hi, Laurie says hello, she's a fellow Canadian, Birdie says hi, Promlo is my aunt, says hi, Megan says hey. What advice or what thoughts would you want to give people? And I'd really like to hear from you guys. Have you got any questions for Sundance? Are there any things that are going through your head or any, anything you want to ask? Please, now's the time to ask him. And in the meantime, Sundance, what would your suggestions, advice, or feedback be for, I guess, your colleagues now, people who have got some grounding in the principles, who I'm guessing they're in the group because they want to help other people?
That everything that you think is insignificant really isn't. There's a lot of minutes in the day to get things accomplished, and it's really important to spend your time wisely, and having those conversations. Sometimes it's better to rest so you can show up more powerfully the next day. And even if you don't think the conversation you're about to have is going to be powerful, chances are it's going to be the powerful conversation that you're going to have. The thing that you never thought you were going to get anything out of, or the person you were sitting in front of didn't get anything out of that, it was all crap. They got something really big out of it. What I tend to think really doesn't matter It's the direction that my heart is moving in that matters. It's the pull. It's the reason why everybody signed up for this. Everybody is in this coaching forum. Like everybody here, like everybody that's watching this has had that moment. We've all had it where they said, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. And somewhere along the way, we get disconnected from it and we forget about it. And sometimes people go farther than other people go. Some people come right back to center right away. Boom. And they're just dialed and they keep pursuing. And some people wallow in self-doubt a little bit, right? And it's important to be still. It's important to check in, you know. It's important to just stop and pause.
You know, I was talking to someone before this Facebook Live, and we were talking about service, and I said, you know, there's a lot of misunderstanding about service, but for me, service is, you know, it includes, for me at least, being willing for other people not to like me. You know, serving someone, helping them, and being willing for people not to like me. And I think, you know, you've really demonstrated that, like you said, you were scared of what people were going to think of you. You were scared of what your friends were going to say. And yet you kind of took that step forward anyway. And I think you really saw how powerful the principles are, and you know, how much it could help you, and if it helped you, how much it could help other people. And I think that's true for all of us, that everyone watching this, you're right, we're here because we've seen something in these principles, right? We've seen something in this, and at some point we've decided to say, we want to help other people with that. Mm-hmm. And, you know, we've got, I say it, we've got the best thing in our back pocket, which is the principles, you know, the way that life really works, which in my mind trumps any technique or tool or any other training that's out there. And, you know, again, this is why I asked at the beginning of this, you know, have you got any qualifications? You're not a psychologist, you're not a therapist, you know, you don't have any of that, and it's not needed.
Mm-hmm. No, it's not. It's not. It's, you know, I don't know, in taking action with these events, I don't know what I'm doing a lot of the time until the event actually starts. But I know that, like, that's the funny thing about all this is that when you show up, it starts. Right now, what we're doing, it starts. You know, you don't have to worry about what's going to happen when you're in commute to an event, about what you're going to do at the event. You make the commute. You don't spend that time worrying about what's going to happen. Then you get to the event, you talk to people, everybody sits down, and then guess what happens? It starts. That's how this works. And when you're in that pocket of when everything starts, you can feel the silence drop. You can feel the silence take up that space, and you can feel it happen within everybody. And you interact with people and you talk with people, because life interacts with people. And we just move deeper and deeper and deeper into ourselves, and we remove those misunderstandings, you know? Oh.
Was I just muted that whole time? I think I was.
The whole time,
yeah, I'm just talking with no sound. Sorry about that, guys.
I bet you it was really good.
Oh, it was the best thing I've ever said. Yeah, you'll never know what it was. I was saying that Lynn has said, hi, I've come in a bit late. I'm a fellow Canadian. I'm gutted that I've missed quite a bit of this. And I've said Niels has already replied. That, you know, as soon as this is done, this is recorded, you'll be able to go back to the beginning, and if you sign up to the mailing list, you'll get you'll get a link to this as well. So thanks, Niels, for that. Hazel says, I've not really got a question, but it's great to hear how Sundance just went ahead and started having those conversations. No waiting, no messing around. Absolutely. And she's asked, which I think is a really nice thing, how is the work in the school going? Because I know it's now, you've got the contract and you've now started.
Mm-hmm. I had the meet and greet. And so I had the director that is never in the schools. She picked me up. We went over to the school, and then we met the social worker who works in the school but isn't in the classroom. So I had the director, the social worker. Then we went into the classroom and sat with the educators and the students. So the students sat on this couch, and I sat up at the front, and I just started telling them my story, and I talked to them about how I was right back in the classroom again, right back in the same classroom that I had always been in throughout my schooling experience. It wasn't at the same high school, but it was the same sort of setup. And I was able to come and tell them exactly what was going on inside of me in that moment. And I said, why I'm here is because I listened to what was inside of me. And there's this spark inside of me that exists. And I don't think that I ever listened to it when I was in high school. Like, I played music and did things like that were fun. But I never ever, I was so overburdened by anxieties. And I was able to share with them just about that spark. And it was funny. Some of the kids, because they're fiddlers, the kids that they like to fiddle and mess around with stuff when people are talking. But that's actually how they learn. So the one kid was drawing. The other girl was making a necklace. And the other kid was just sort of off in space. And another two of the kids were missing. And the other couple kids were in class. So I didn't challenge the mind in that scenario. I just dropped into that place that I knew we both had in common. I don't know where their mind is at, and I don't need to worry about where their mind is at. So I just said, can you draw the spark? Can you draw that? Because they actually all agreed that they had one. Even the kid that was off somewhere else in the mind, but their spark and that light was what was putting that light on the mind, and they just had to connect with that. And we're just finished going through a civic holiday week. So I said, maybe when you guys have some time this week, try to draw your spark. So the teachings of the three principles, I'm trying to get them to just draw that and what it looks like to them. And it puts them in a place of their own creativity. And it puts them in a place of where they can be happy and proud of something that they're going to bring to you. Because where we sit down in a group, it's a group experience, but it's also very personal, right? And that's where the breakthrough happens. One kid says something, and the other kid across the room gets an insight, and then they say something. They say, "Oh, you know what? That person said something that I've been silent about this for the last 20 minutes or the last 20 years." And that person just said something that I can confirm is going on inside of me. And now all of a sudden I'm free by that, and that's one of the things that, again, is so important about having conversations with people. I remember also at the men's immersion, the conversation that I had with Niels over lunch. It was you encouraged him to have a coaching conversation, to set up a quick coaching conversation at lunch. And where somebody might think, well, that's insignificant, and I'd rather just focus on my lunch and have guy talk. We sat down and we had some Vietnamese food, and we had a coaching conversation. And that coaching conversation went into me being a victim about what the government had did to my dad and the trauma that they put him through with the way the Aboriginals were treated in Canada. And it brought up a whole bunch of victimness inside of me and my reason and excuse for not paying my taxes. Well, and this became very burdensome for me. I just made a $7,000 payment to the government of Canada, zeroed out my debt, and that's a huge chunk of debt that has now been eliminated as the result of a coaching conversation that I had over lunch with Niels at the men's immersion. If I would have sat at home on my couch, you think any of this would have happened? And it isn't the fact that I made the payment, it's the fact of how I made the payment. Like, I didn't struggle and was like, I just gave it because it's energy. It's coming back. It's coming around. It's not going anywhere. You know, it's just energy. So, I mean, this is fundamental stuff. And when you start to embody that, everything changes. Everything changes. There's so much of me that wanted to hold on to it all, you know. And then when I relaxed and just let go and became content with where I can just sit, everything changed.
So you talked about having, anger at the Canadian government. It was interesting, wasn't it? Because when you had this insight around the government, it was then, very soon afterwards that the government then came to you and said, "Can you help us? And we'll pay you for that."
Yeah, isn't that funny? That when I released that, it returned. And don't let that ever be the expectation. I'm going to release this and it's coming back, because I didn't expect that to happen at all. Who would have knew? Who would have knew? Mm-hmm. Who would have knew that I would be in a high school teaching kids? Who would have ever known any of this? I could never have imagined this happening.
Yeah, what? I hope you don't mind me asking. What was your day job before you were doing this?
Machinist, and you know what? I'm still doing machining, but I'm in a place of where I'm preparing to leave my career as a machinist. I do work for I subcontract for defense, so I was in that, but I skipped around for a few years when I was doing that, and I tried a couple different careers out, right? And I couldn't get grounded in anything, I just knew that there was something more. That was it. There was something more in me. And I returned to my job as a machinist and just worked in a shop, and I work with welders like Sydney Bank was. And I don't know, I just worked in a shop, man. And everything's changed. Everything's changed.
I love the fact that your job is so similar to what Sid did. You haven't got an especially high education. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way at all. I'm saying that because I know you had a lot of thinking about it, and I said to you, it doesn't matter. It doesn't. No one cares. And and that also you're in Canada, and it's funny to me how the principles have really taken off around the world, and it seems to be. And I don't know if Lynn is still on this, but how little is going on in Canada, and every time I would talk to a Canadian 3 Principles person, I'm like, you know what, please go and do this. Go and take this out to your communities. Go and take it out to people in Canada, because, if I always think that, if why not more in Canada? It was is where Sid lived for such a long time. Niels has said it was truly wonderful connecting Sundance, and I love that coaching call was so helpful. Jill is just commenting, this is so awesome. So I'm glad you're finding this useful, Jill. This conversation. Can I ask a practical question that some people might have? Maybe people who are not live might have this question.
Yeah, of course. I'd love to see how I react to questions that I have no idea are coming at me.
No problem. It shouldn't be a difficult question. It was just a practical one that when the local government, you said that they heard about you, they connected with you online. What did they have in mind? Like, did they, what were they looking for from you? Were they saying, were just interested in you? Were they saying, "Oh, we've got a contract. We think you might be a good fit for"? Like, what was? I mean, not that you know what was going on in the head of the person that reached out, but what were the sort of things they were looking for from you?
Community, really. They didn't have. There's just no community in the smaller suburbs around Regina. Everybody's sort of isolated unto themselves within their own homes. And, not a lot of people go out in the evenings unless it's to the pubs or anything like that. And the kids that are in high school are partying and all that sort of thing. So the kids that are not integrating within the general masses don't really have a sense of community, or they don't really feel like they have a sense of belonging, or where do they go? Right. So they, a lot of the time, just sit isolated unto themselves. And so they wanted to find a way to be able to enrich the lives of these kids so they can feel like they have something inside of them that is valuable, right? And that says something to me, because they're saying that they're the inverse of that, that they feel like they're not valuable, that they feel like they don't really have something to offer, or that because they don't integrate a certain way, that they're not good, or that they're unworthy, right? And so they wanted me to try to be able to pull them back to center when they get a little heady, or when they feel like skipping a few days of school. It's just like, can you find a way to get them back to center without preaching to them and telling them that you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong, you need to do this, and you need to do that? Is there a way that you can create insight? Right? That's the beautiful thing. If I can just lead them into that space and have them wander around in that space, just so they can have a little bit of insight, it becomes the conviction. That's why insight is so important, and that was why I saw the benefits of 3P in coaching, is that once you get insight yourself, it becomes your conviction. It's unchangeable, and you move towards that. And those kids now have had some insight, and they're going to ponder that. They're going to draw about it, they're going to think about it. And when I go back, there's going to be questions. I guess I just don't, that's what they wanted me to do. They just wanted to get these kids activated in something.
And did you have to fill out like tender documents? Did you have to make big proposals? I know that sort of stuff can scare people sometimes, or look like it's
what's
scaring
funny?
people.
Yeah, no, I just have to come up with a government sales tax number, which I'm getting. But this whole process has actually caused me to sort of raise my bar about how I conduct business professionally. But I'm actually quite surprised, to tell you the truth, that within government, how loosely this has happened. This happened via Facebook. This happened via text message. This happened one email. This happened to me showing up in a school board. I just learned the 3Ps. I just understood the 3Ps. I just understood the grounding of what 3P was. I took what the people of 3P, the founders, what Chip had talked about. One day, someone will just know this content, and he'll sit down with educators, and he'll be able to incite change. And when I sat down in a boardroom with educators and people that had psychology degrees, and it turned into a Q&A, they felt that. That was the grounding that came across to everybody, right? And I've done that now, right? Where I've helped incite that change, and I don't have the schooling that people need. I don't have psychology. I'm actually getting together and sitting down with a psych major, and we're going to have a conversation on Tuesday at lunch about men's work, because he does men's work too in the city here, but he's a psychologist, right? And so we're just, it's totally transformed the way that I look. It's totally changed the people that I'm talking to. Now I'm talking to these people that have substantial degrees and spent a lot of money on schooling, man. What did I do? I bought a plane ticket and I flew to Birmingham, England, and I sat with a bunch of guys in a room, and we sat and talked. And that's education.
I'm getting goosebumps. I don't know about anyone else, but I'm really feeling this. I'm getting goosebumps just hearing you talk about what Chip said and how you felt in that room, just talking to psychologists and just talked about what made sense to you and fell into that feeling, because this is just so useful for me to hear as much as it is to anyone else, just as such a beautiful reminder that, you know what, that's what does the heavy lifting, right? It's that feeling. It's when we get into that connection. You know, Steve Chandler and I did this video last year about why coaching is a relationship business, and I'm constantly seeing that more and more and being reminded of it. And you're just reminding me of that now, that this is all a relationship business. Mm-hmm. And what better way to fall into a relationship with someone than point ourselves to that feeling?
You did an interview with Steve Chandler a little while ago that you did on Facebook Live. And that was really good. That was fundamentally key, because he talks about, well, how do you talk to a child when a child makes a mistake or when a child needs help? You know, that's not an overcomplicated situation there, but we tend to overcomplicate that. And going into a room and sitting with people that have, you know, bachelor's of education, psychology, all that sort of stuff, one could think, what am I going to do and how am I going to handle that situation, and try to really overcomplicate that. That actually wasn't nerve-wracking at all. I wasn't nervous going into that. I was actually way more nervous going and sitting down with those kids, you know, because I knew that I could connect with adults, you know, connecting with people. For me, you know, mothers are very good at connecting with children. You know, women are very good at connecting with children. I see the way a mother connects with her child. It's the same way, you know, that you connect with those kids. For me, working with the age demographic of between 35 and 55, it sounds like a dream demographic. I don't feel a lot of pressure and strain in that age demographic. But stepping into a 16 to 18, that's a little bit scary for me, you know. So I'm very challenged and I'm very stretched in this opportunity.
I love that you say that, and yet you're still doing it. You know, that's the beauty of it. You know, you're not turning around and saying, "Oh, I don't see it." So it sounds like you're saying, "I feel outside in with this group, but I'm still talking to them." Mm-hmm. Right, and it kind of flies in the face of, we need to find our niche, right? Because then you might look, well, this is my demographic, and this is who I'm gonna talk to. But no, you've just let life unfold. Mm-hmm. Lynn says, apart from the school on Salt Spring Island, there isn't much happening in Canada from a 3P perspective. Although having said that, Jack Pransky is coming to Ontario in April. Very excited about that. But I agree, Ankush, us Canadians need to get out more and talk about the 3Ps more. I'm starting to do it more with my divorce recovery group that I run. Well, I really hope that this conversation inspires everyone, you know, Canadians and non-Canadians, that we've already got everything we need to go and start doing this. And I'm getting goosebumps, because what I see, Sundance, is you going out and doing this is not only helping those kids, it's going to have I'm getting choked up. You're going to have an impact that you don't even realize, because those kids are going to go home. Those kids are going to talk to their siblings. They're going to have an impact on their parents. You know, Jamie Smart used to say this to me: when we work with people and point them to the principles, we're not only changing their lives, we're changing the lives of the people around them, and even their unborn children. You know, this is having a generational impact, and you're just modeling that beautifully. Jill Whalen says, you know, when I talked about goosebumps earlier, me too, goosebumps and in tears. Birdie just commented, Sundance is awesome, XX.
It's funny because you don't see as we talk and as we dialogue, I don't think that that's what people are feeling. Right? I'm wondering is anything going on out there? Are people receiving this? Is this being picked up? Is this being, just drop all that. You know, you said it at the men's immersion. You know how you do it? You just get silent. You sat there and you stared off into space.
I remember that.
And that's it. Offer something that people have never been offered before. Silence. Silence. It's simple. I never got, even when I heard that, because I heard about all of the work that Sydney Banks and these guys that they did in jails. And Sydney Banks went up and he said he was in tears, and then he turned around and he said to the entire jail, "You're all innocent." And I didn't get it even then what that meant, but I get it now. And if you don't get it, I hope you do. I won't give that away. That's an understanding that you have to come to yourself. It's way more powerful when you understand that yourself, rather than someone just giving you that, But I understand and I get it. When Sydney Banks looked at an entire jail of people and said, "You're all innocent."
One thing I really admire about you, Sundance, I'm getting so much from this myself. But when you came to the immersion last year, you were so open. I will say that you were so open, and I do these little videos, as you know, I do these little videos with everyone that comes to my immersion events prior to the immersion, and you really opened up in that, and you talked about your childhood, and you talked about some of the stuff that you'd gone through, not as a I need to do vulnerability, but you just spoke openly without fear, or what seemed like without fear. And that had such an impact on me and every other guy that went to that immersion. And I see you doing it now, and it really is, it's inspirational, and yeah, I'm just getting so much from this. Birdie just asked, Promla says this is too good. Birdie just asked, do you still work with sound, Sundance?
Yeah, actually, I've got an event this weekend. I still got 3 more spots to fill. So if you feel like catching a flight, I'll get you in for real cheap. Absolutely. Yeah, I do it. I love it. I'll always do it. There'll always be a piece of me that does that, for sure.
Yeah, and there's some, if you're not friends with Sundance on Facebook, add him, and you've got some really cool pictures of you working with some big gongs and in Tibetan outfits and different things like that. Some very cool pictures.
I saw you and Steve Chandler on that one picture. You're dressed up in all of your gear, and Steve Chandler was really dressed up in his gear. And I figured, well, I want to do the same.
That was at my wedding, yeah. So I it's not just something I dress up at the weekend as, but
okay.
Yeah, Birdie said she'd love to connect with you. She's a sound healer too. So
oh, wonderful.
So
that's great.
So great connections there. One question that nobody's asked, but someone did ask me this week when they heard that I was doing this interview with you. They were like, "That's a very interesting name, Sundance. Could you tell us a little bit about that?" No one's asked about your name.
My dad gave it to me. My dad was an Aboriginal Canadian, so he was full-blooded Indian to Canada. Mm. And he just gave me that name. That's what he felt like. But actually, it's a very historical name. The Sundance is a type of ceremonial dance that takes place over prayer and fasting, and is very, very much a traditional dance that the natives have done here in North America for hundreds of years, obviously thousands of years. And so he passed away in 1999 of a heroin overdose. And I never went by Sundance. I went by Justin. And as I came into being, I just honored him with it. And I'm actually going to go and do a Sundance in June. I'm going to go and sit with some elders and talk, and it's going to be a really cool time. But a real little short, funny story that was part of the story was that when I went into school in kindergarten, I remember seeing Sundance written on my box. It was it was like 1985, and it said Sundance, and I couldn't even really read it. I saw this name written across the box, and I remember kids making fun of me because my name was Sundance. And so my dad was like, well, we'll have to switch it. We'll just go with Justin, and we'll call him Justin then, Justin James Sundance Robson. And so that was what went on. But I learned to be ashamed of who I was before I learned to tie my shoes. Because it was only about 3 months later that we then took this course on how to tie our shoes. We had a little book with a bunch of shoelaces and stuff in it. And that was the accumulation of the story, right? So, never be ashamed of who you are. Don't buy the story, man. It's just so much profound insight that has just happened within this last year that I'm anchored to. That is really me. I'm not. Before, when I would do a conversation with you, I remember the ritual that I would go through to get ready to talk to Ankush Jain. And I remember how much time I spent reading content the days leading up to doing all of that. And this morning I woke up, I went down to the gym. I sat and had a steam, grabbed a Starbucks on the way home, and I sat and waited for this to happen,
Very different experience.
Simple. Yeah, really different experience.
I never knew that story about your name, and I've got not the same story, not quite the same, but a similar story, or a story around Kush, that someone gave me that and I hated it, and then when I started getting into personal development, I kind of started using that name again. I was like, I want to reclaim it for myself. Because I didn't like not liking it, and and it's a totally different effect. Well, we've come up to time now, so we're heading up 3:30. So thank you for giving us an hour of your time. Hazel says she loves your name. Laurie says Sundance is such a cool name. So you've certainly got some fans here of the name, and I think you've touched an awful lot of people with this time and what you shared, and I know it's just a glimpse of the work that you do and what you have to share. But thank you so much for giving that to us. If anybody wants to connect with you after this, if they've got any questions that they didn't want to ask publicly, are you happy for them to do that?
Absolutely. I'm always happy to answer questions. It's just part of my service. It's just the way that I get insight from answering questions, because somebody wants an answer. So, and I love seeing people have insight and being able to not have the question is they just want a little more assuredness in something, right?
Cool. And they can do that through Facebook. Is that the best way to get in contact? Yeah,
or Alpha Focus Coaching at hotmail.com. Alpha Focus Coaching at hotmail.com. They can email me that too. So
cool. Well, thanks once again. If you got any questions, reach out and we'll be happy to answer them. Thank you again, Sundance.
Thank you so much for your time, Ankush. It was a pleasure. I only thought it was going to be half an hour, and it was an hour. So this was really great. It was like church.
Take care.